There used to be a bridge over the Solway Firth. It ran from here at Bowness-on-Solway across to Annan on the northern shore, and it was a railway bridge opened in 1869 by the Solway Junction Railway Company. In the severe winter of 1880 to 81, the upper reaches of the Solway froze solid, and when the thaw came, the powerful Solway tides ebbed and they dragged massive ice floes towards the bridge, and travelling fast at between 10 and 15 miles an hour, these massive chunks of ice smashed into the wooden structure, snapping 45 of the 193 piers like matchsticks. Fortunately, there was no train on the bridge at the time, and unlike at the Tay Bridge, there was no loss of life. The wooden structure was replaced by more robust ironwork, and trains began to run again. The idea was to transport Cumbrian iron ore up to the steelworks of Lanarkshire. But business fell away and traffic was not frequent. By 1921, the bridge was thought to be unsafe and it closed. And in 1933, it was finally demolished. The Solway Viaduct was a bridge too far in other ways. The community of the Solway had forgotten that it had been boats which had held them together for thousands of years. Rail transport had failed to do that, and in time the motor car would divide this ancient community even further. But cheap transport did provide some benefits, and it led to the creation of a new industry. Tourism would in fact become the biggest industry on both shores of the Great Firth. Tourism now directly employs thousands of people, and it uses the services supplied by many other ancillary workers. Around the Solway, it began to develop very early. This is all that remains of Silloth railway station. Once it was a hugely popular holiday destination. Rail tickets to Silloth from Carlisle were cheap, and factories in towns and cities began to see the benefits of giving their employees holidays. And when trade unions fought and won the battles for paid holidays, mass tourism was born. The seaside was different. Nowhere was there more open air. Nowhere in Britain was more different from the noisy, grimy and closed-in factories of the grey cities of the Midlands and the North. The development of Silloth provides a perfect case history, how the Solway itself was sidelined and how the tourist industry grew. These wide, grid-plan cobbled streets were built for strolling holidaymakers, people who wanted to be beside the seaside. And they came in their droves, mostly from Carlisle, by train and often for day trips. But the railway which brought them was built for another purpose entirely. These docks were intended as a terminal for ferries across the Irish Sea to Belfast and Dublin. Investors in the railway wanted to supply the last link in a chain connecting Edinburgh, Newcastle and the North Sea ports with the Irish Sea. Silloth was to become what Stranraer and the Lancashire ports are now, but it didn't work. Commercial traffic was diverted elsewhere, and the day trippers and the holidaymakers came instead. In 1857, only a short time after the railway opened, July and August saw an average of 1,500 passengers a week, most travelling from grimy Carlisle to sunny Silloth. A company was formed to create a resort here. They encouraged open landscaping and built a small network of wide boulevards. And by 1860, there were 4 hotels and 18 boarding houses, all of them doing a roaring summer trade. In only 4 years, Silloth had mushroomed into the Solway's first purpose-built resort. Now perhaps there's a touch of faded glamour here and there now, but the town still retains much of its Victorian panache, and it takes little imagination to see the streets thronging once again with Homburg hats, parasols and crinolines.
Silloth was a very popular holiday place after the war. In fact, the most prominent holiday place on the Solway coast here, Silloth with its big 30-acre green in front of the town and the promenade was always popular. There was a lot of people came to Silloth for the annual holiday. When a train came in, it was rather like a football match getting out, because they came out of the station, up Station Road, and into the town or onto the green. Various things on the green, of course, the donkeys, very popular, the donkeys. Johnny Gray was a very well-known man with his donkeys on the green, and you hadn't been at Silloth if you hadn't had a ride on a donkey. There was a putting green on the green, that was popular. Equally, the tennis courts on the green, they were always full. And the other thing that Silloth is well known for was the ice creams, and especially long cakes ice creams. Again, they said you hadn't been to Silloth if you hadn't had a long cakes ice cream. Most houses in Silloth, in the terraced houses in Silloth, took bed and breakfast guests. Nowadays, you'd have a job to find a house that does it. People made extra money from that, and indeed it was needed to accommodate the people from such as Carlisle. Even Glasgow and Newcastle came as well. The reason it declined was the fact that people got used with the package holiday abroad, came to the decline of the Silloth annual holiday. But nevertheless, Silloth was always popular because of its, well, quiet, serene outlook, I think. And even to this day it is, but day visits are more popular now.
If one lives in Galloway, one either paints or fishes. That's the first line of Five Red Herrings, the detective novel by Dorothy L. Sayers, which is set in Kirkcudbright amongst the artists' colony. And it's also exactly the kind of crusty comment that one might expect from a novel which has as a central character Lord Peter Wimsey, the aristocratic detective. But it doesn't matter that it's nonsense, because since Walter Scott set Red Gauntlet around the shores of the Solway, Galloway has become a place of the imagination.
I think that this area has had a long fascination for writers, not just people that come from the area, who have lived in the area, like, for instance, Burns or James Barke, but also people who have visited and been fascinated by it. Someone that comes to mind would be Walter Scott, and if you think of the opening scenes of Red Gauntlet, where you have this chap who's a kind of Jacobite past his sell-by date, I suppose, galloping across the Solway estuary to rescue a really rather effete city-bred boy, while there are people spearing salmon around them, you get a sense of how the distinctive aspects of the region really captivated artistic imaginations like Scott's. And I think for someone like Burns too, who was riding the length and breadth of this region in his duties as an exciseman, that sort of sense of excitement must have come across very strongly. One of the best known books which features parts of this region would be John Buchan's 39 Steps, and these wonderful scenes that everyone knows of Richard Hannay being chased across the moors by the baddies are very much located within this particular region. And for Buchan, that sort of wildness and openness of the landscape allowed him to explore the dangerous aspects of the story. And in a sense, that's probably what the greatest contribution of this area is in literary terms, is that it presents landscapes which are very open, which are sometimes lacking in a sense of human habitation, particularly now when so many people have been forced for economic reasons to leave the region. And for Buchan, writing in the early part of the 20th century, that was very much the case too. So there's a sense of, I suppose, nostalgia in some respect that permeates how he's writing about the region. But there's also a sense of possibility, and it's when Hannay gets out of the city of London and into the Scottish landscape and into the landscapes of Galloway that the story really takes off, and he's able to confront the demons, the physical demons that are chasing him, and find out a bit more about this adventure he's embarked on.
In part 2, we see how painters were influenced by the light and the landscape of the Solway, and how Kirkcudbright became attractive to artists.
Fast cars, flashy bars, private jet, bigger pecs, big lips, small hips, designer gown, buy a town, penthouse pad, the latest fad, permatan, any man, fancy yacht, something hot, diamonds bling, everything. Britain's biggest spenders, Tuesday at 9, ITV1.
1, 2, 3, oh, we go. I'm going to be you. In the office, isn't that brilliant?
Fiona.
I told them I was your wife, I hope you don't mind. This is my home, Fiona. My husband, my family. I just don't know what's real and what's in my head. She's trying to take over.
Brand new drama.
I'm all yours.
The Kindness of Strangers, Wednesday at 9, ITV1.
From the opening of the railway station in 1864, Kirkcudbright began to attract painters. And these painters were not simply enthusiastic amateurs. Some of Britain's very best 19th and early 20th century artists came.
It started to grow about the 1880s when Hornell, the local boy, came back from college from Belgium. And he set himself up here with the ambition of making it, which was an extraordinary aspiration. And then, round about 1900, there was an influx. Bill Robson came. You know, having been brought up in Edinburgh, he'd gone to Italy and lived and worked in Capri. And he decided that Kirkcudbright was the place for him, so he came from Capri to Kirkcudbright with his Italian wife and set up his exotic Italian ménage on the high street. The big influx, of course, were the duet of Jessie M. King and E.A. Taylor. Jessie M. King, now one of the most collectible Art Nouveau artists. E.A. Taylor, a great sort of Renaissance man. The two of them had been living and working in Paris. The First World War broke out. They came to the safety of Kirkcudbright and never left. They bought this great house in the high street, the Green Gate, and they had lots of little cottages down the close, which they renovated, and they rented those out to young artists during the summer, and a lot of those young artists never left. They stayed into old age.
As Galloway dozed in sunlit rural peace, Victorian painters tried hard to capture its atmosphere. The group of painters, known as the Glasgow Boys, began to come to Kirkcudbright in the 1880s. It was the clear but mellow Galloway light which attracted painters away from grimy industrial Glasgow and the unspoilt nature of the landscape.
I think probably the most important attraction was cheapness of living. You know, none of them were very rich, and so they had to watch their pennies. And although Kirkcudbright now is one of the most expensive places to invest in the property market and just live now, then it was very, very cheap. It had all the advantages of cheap rural living. So that was one reason. They also came apparently because of the painter-friendly light. There's something about the light being reflected off the river and the Solway in general that makes it a nice light for painters.
In 2005, Kirkcudbright mounted an exhibition of the paintings of Claude Monet and other French Impressionist painters. The organisers hoped that 30,000 extra visitors might come to the town, but in the event, more than 60,000 people came to see the French Impressionist show.
It is a significant part of the history of the town, and that aspect of it has to be promoted, and one is very proud that people want to come to Kirkcudbright because of its history as an artist colony. When I meet people and they say, "Where are you from?" the first thing I tell them is, "I come from Kirkcudbright. That's the St Ives of Scotland, the famous artist town."
After a century of almost constant change in farming, when the drain of people from the Solway countryside turned into a flood, it seemed to many that the apocalypse arrived in 2000. As foot and mouth disease tore through the Solway farming communities, it created a medieval landscape of death, fire and smoke. Thousands of slaughtered beasts blazed on immense pyres, and it appeared to many that a way of life was going up in smoke with them. Farming had been a staple of the Solway economy for millennia, but now its future looked worse than uncertain. But green shoots were breaking through elsewhere. In 1999, the Solway saw its first university open. On the site of a former hospital, the Crichton campus was established.
I think the Crichton represents a unique experiment because we're a campus of tertiary education. We are partnered by the University of Paisley, Dumfries and Galloway College, Bell College, the Scottish Agricultural College. We're very interested in distance learning. We're very interested in delivering courses in new ways, like short courses. So instead of coming for 3 hours a week for 10 weeks, we might ask you to show up for 3 days. We'll do the whole thing in 3 days. It'll be intensive, but for certain subjects that works better. But most important of all, I think we're trying to help with the regeneration of this area, to find out what the community wants, what the community needs, economically, and in other ways as well, culturally, I hope. If we could draw on the kind of inspirational moments in the past of this area, if we could understand the past better and we can see some of the terrible mistakes I think that have been made in the past, we avoid them obviously in the future because we live in a different world, but at the same time there's a special quality down here in Dumfries and Galloway which I think is worth telling the rest of the world about, and which can maybe inform what we do even in our daily lives down the road.
For many around the Solway, tourism is already vital to the economy, and it holds the key to a prosperous future.
The importance of tourism to Dumfries and Galloway, I think, can be put into monetary perspective by saying that it's understood that £180 million comes in through tourist expenditure. By that I mean people who stay for over one night. You've also got day visitors who bring in up to £100 million a year in potential. This is a very substantial industry. It is also estimated that in terms of employment, the tourist industry brings in 11% of the jobs to the region, which is substantial. More interesting, I think, are some of the grassroots developments that have happened in the regions, and it's really one of my interests is what I call the theme towns. And you're thinking about Wigtown Book Town, Kirkcudbright Artist Town, Castle Douglas Food Town. Now these are three small towns, populations around 2,000 to 4,000, and they have tried to utilise their cultural heritage in terms of building a unique identity and attracting visitors. These developments I find very interesting because they're driven by local people who know the region but want to attract people from outside.
While Dumfries and Galloway develops a tourist industry based on its tranquility and beauty, what about West Cumbria with its industrial scars? It seems also to have begun to embrace the past.
Tourist customers are more sophisticated than we often give them credit for. You know, they don't see industrial West Cumbria, you know, as a felt pen moustache on the Mona Lisa, the way that some people in the heart of Lakeland do. You know, people come here and they like the variety. The story is a thrilling one, and the tourist industry is harnessing that story. We're fighting very hard at the moment to extend the Hadrian's Wall National Trail, for example. You know, that national trail, it runs, you know, along the line of the wall across the narrow neck of land, Wall's End to Bowness. But that's only half the Roman frontier. Half of it's ignored at the moment. There's huge projects in the pipeline in West Cumbria that's going to revolutionise the way we think of West Cumbria. The Derwent Forest is an immensely exciting project, you know, an old, you know, military site which was used for munitions storage. Huge site, huge. And the potential of things you could do there. There's all sorts of exciting ideas firing off each other about what you do with the Derwent Forest. Now it's been vacated by the military. Just imagine this. In the Ravenglass estuary, you reconstruct a length of Roman wharfage as it would have been in Agricola's day. And better than that, you harness the shipbuilding skills that are still there in West Cumbria and you build a replica of a Roman ship. And that lies in at Ravenglass, and at the right state of the tide, it sails from Ravenglass to Maryport and delivers customers to the Roman fort in Maryport. It's a big scheme, it'll take a long time, it'll take a vast sum of money, but it's possible. It'll certainly bring to prominence this western frontier down to Ravenglass, and I think it's a really, really exciting future. We ain't seen nothing yet. West Cumbria is going to be an immensely exciting place. Watch out for it.
Because the past in the Solway was glittering, from St Ninian to the Kirkcudbright painters, from Hadrian's sea wall to the great iron makers of Workington, then perhaps the future can also shine brightly. And perhaps confidence could flow from a knowledge of history. Confidence that this place is not a backwater, not a corner of Britain, but a place that's centrally important to our history and to our future. Because the truth is that the Solway is a beautiful place, a place worth knowing about, and a place worth coming to see for yourself.